Hey friends, Zach with No Mind's Eye here. So it's kind of funny, I've been putting off recording this video all week because I like to do my higher level thinking and creative work, such as content creation, in peak emotional states. And, the issue with this is the world is an imperfect place and things happen and we stumble and, we can't expect ourselves to always be operating from, this peak level. So rather than putting this off any longer, I said, you know what? I'm going to just take the time right here on a Sunday afternoon to create this video. So if you have any issues with me doing this without a shirt, without my beautiful background, all that stuff, I apologize, but I thought that I'll let the content speak for itself this time. So, what we're talking about today is perspective. So, if we want to approach aphantasia and a bigger picture than that, if we want to approach, working with our mind and identifying our strengths and setting our life and our behaviors up to best complement these things, we first have to take some time and examine our mindset and our perspective, right? Uh, so if we look at aphantasia as a disadvantage, we're going to feel a host of feelings, right? We're going to feel maybe discouraged. We're going to feel sad, like we're missing out on something. We may feel envious because others get to have this experience. We may feel broken or incapable. And so, as you may know, our emotions are a precursor to our actions. And our actions are a precursor to our life, right? And so, what I mean by that is if we feel sad, we're going to act sad, right? We're not going to be all cheery and come in and influence others and take risks and live confidently. And so that's going to influence our actions, which then plays out into, a series of actions, like over time, become our life circumstances, right? So what starts before the emotions is the thought, the perspective, the mindset. So if we're feeling sad and discouraged, maybe we will use that as an excuse not to try something hard, not to put ourselves out there. Um, settling for saying, well, I'm just not good at that because I have aphantasia, right? So a disadvantage is going to change our emotional state, and a perspective of disadvantage will change our emotional state to a disempowered one. And then that will disempower us in our actions and lead to a disempowering life. So there's this quote by this smart guy you may know, Albert Einstein, and he said, there are two ways to live your life. One, as if everything is a miracle, and the other, as if nothing is a miracle. And this isn't uh, telling you to be blindly optimistic and, throw caution to the wind. This is saying that whenever we decide to look at the world as against us, we're giving up our power. We're giving up our responsibility for our life, right? And we're playing as the victim. And more importantly, we're putting ourselves in one of those disempowered emotional states, right? But if we choose to look at everything as happening for us, we can find meaning in all that happens, even if it is odd, the odds are, stacked against us. And I'm not saying that aphantasia does not come without its issues. For myself, I've found it very difficult to keep my eye on a future outcome that I would like to work towards. I'm easily distracted. I get excited with things in the moment. So for me, I have to try extra hard to keep a very clear focus and to persevere on one path so I'm not doing this thing, right? But regardless of that, I choose to look at aphantasia as a benefit for me in the sense that the discovery of this has given me a better awareness of how my mind works, right? And knowing how my mind works allows me to work with it. So, and further than that, let's just go a little bit deeper. So, one of the strengths that I very much associate with aphantasia is a present moment focus. And I think most everybody can relate with this, right? So, what does this look like and how does this affect my life? Well, first off, whenever something bad happens, a relationship ends, I spend a much shorter time recovering from that, super low state. And I'm able to pick myself back up and keep on moving forward. And I think that's because mental imagery, I believe, has the strongest emotional attachment out of any of our senses, right? And so if we're constantly seeing an image of what was and recognizing that that's not what we currently have, then we're going to feel bad, right? And this also goes for traumatic events. It brings an emotional charge that we are not privy to. This also helps in the future, right? Because a lot of people spend a lot of time just paralyzed to the point of inaction because they're so fearful. And so for myself, I've always, I experience fear just like everybody else, but it doesn't have a grip on me that keeps me from, in a state of inaction. I can move through it. And it's because I'm not seeing these like gruesome, horrible outcomes. Instead, I'm looking at it more logically. If this, then that. If I go do this, if I go put myself out there, there's a chance that this cool thing could happen. And, yes, there are these other chances, but again, it's this somewhat emotional detachment from these worst possible outcomes, so I can move through more aware in the moment. So again, we can look at it as a disadvantage, and then we're going to have disempowering emotions, and we're going to be disempowered in our actions, and this will create a disempowered life. But if we can look at this as an advantage, we can start feeling better, right? We can start looking at how can I learn from this? What is there possibly in this to teach me? And another part of this perspective, rather than just an advantage, but take it to Albert Einstein's quote and looking at this as a miracle. Whenever an ecologist looks at an ecosystem, they see all these different animals, right? And if you were to take one animal out of the ecosystem, it affects the whole ecosystem, right? So here's a link. If there were not bees, then plants would have a problem reproducing, right? But if there were not plants, then bees would lose their food source. So they exist synergistically, mutually, in an environment, right? Look at our minds as a special, necessary element of a neurodiverse ecosystem. Recognize that not everybody can be, an A-type personality. There's got to be a balance in order to make our ecosystem thrive. And what I'm proposing is, what if there's visual thinkers for a reason? What if there's non-visual thinkers for a reason that are more centered in logic, that are more learning by auditory and kinesthetic? We all have our strengths, so we've got to focus on those, solution focus, and once we start doing that, we're going to pick ourselves up out of that mopey state and feel energized. And that's where the real magic happens. So if you guys really want to start doing work and learning from our minds, learning about our unique cognitive fingerprints and how we can best utilize them, we've got to shift our perspective. So Aphantasia can be at advantage. And ask yourself how it can be. Because the questions we ask us are always going to give us answers. Even if they're stupid questions. Like, why me? And, why am I so dumb? Like, if we ask those questions, we're going to get answers. But if we ask ourselves, what can we learn from this? What are my strengths? How can I play to them? We're also going to find those answers. So, I challenge everybody, embarking on this journey of leveraging your unique cognitive abilities and your strengths and your greatest characteristics. Start looking at this as an advantage. Be grateful. It's a blessing. We're just unique, as is everybody else out there. If you have any questions or any feedback points that you want to make on this topic, please add them in the comments below. And the next few videos are going to be an emotional mastery series. So we'll be talking about identifying and processing our unresourceful emotional states, preparing for those, recognizing the ones that come up and really take us off our game so that we can most effectively navigate them whenever they do come up or altogether avoid them. And then also selecting the emotions that we recognize we feel most fulfilled embodying, that we feel most productive embodying. And by identifying them, we can begin to prime them so we feel them more frequently. So check back in next week for some emotional mastery. And thank you guys all for coming in today. Appreciate you, and we'll chat soon. Bye.